Good. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the third OGP local deep dive about anti-corruption. Before we start, as we've been doing, I'm approving all your AI companions. Thank you. Good. So before we start, as we did in our previous sessions, and many of you may know this already, we have translation available in 50 languages. So to access captions, please scan this QR code that you can find in the slide, using your phone, or tap on the link we're now sharing on the chat. Once you do, make sure you choose the language of your preference and click on Attend. If you're using your phone, you will be able to access audio translation. For this, please select the speaker in the bottom right corner. You're going to see it there. And yes, and if you have an iPhone, make sure that you in the left side bottom, your phone you don't have it set on silent. That's a usual problem we usually have with Wordly. So good. Thank you so much. Are you all good? Great. So now I would also like to invite you to introduce yourselves on the chat, as you might be already doing. And please tell us your name and where you're coming from so that we can all meet and learn who's in this session. If you can, we would also like you for you to turn on your cameras so that we can all see each other. It's always good to see your peers or friends and the people we're connecting with through this community. So please, if you can, turn on your cameras and make sure that you keep your mic muted so that we can listen to the speakers properly. Of course, we do want you to participate and interact as much as possible. So we kindly ask you to use the chat to ask questions, make comments, and contribute throughout the session. Speakers will be fully attentive to the chat, so we hope this becomes an enriching space as well. And the last thing is that this session is being recorded for learning purposes. So I hope that's okay with everyone. Good. So today we're going to be talking about anti-corruption. And this is a very important topic because, as you all know, corruption at the local level directly impacts the services local governments provide. And while their proximity to citizens makes local governments well positioned to address corruption, it can make them more vulnerable to it, right? So this is why OGP local members include anti-corruption measures in their action plans, with commitments like making public procurement more transparent, promoting social accountability, and strengthening oversight mechanisms. These actions seek to reduce the risk of corruption and ensure public services are not compromised. Today's goal, then, is to explore how different open government approaches can help fight corruption at the local level. But before we dive into the subject, we have a quick survey for you. It's a quick poll. We'd like to encourage you to take a moment to share your experience and involvement in anti-corruption efforts. So you're going to see 4 questions, and I'm going to say it out loud so that Wordly can also translate this. The first one is, what is your level of expertise on the subject of anti-corruption? So you can be either a master daddy, that would be like the top, not a master, but confident. And maybe you have heard of the topic, but you want to know more. Maybe you don't have a clue. So those are the 4 options for question 1. Then question 2 is, how involved are you in the anti-corruption efforts in your locality? Maybe you're very involved, somewhat involved, not involved at all. The third question is, would you be interested in taking part of an anti-corruption thematic circle? And some of you don't know, but we in OGP Local, we have different thematic circles that are coordinated by our members and are regarding different topics. If you would be interested in a circle on anti-corruption, please let us know. And the fourth question is, what anti-corruption topics are you most interested in? Good. So we're going to give it a minute. While you're completing the poll, let me briefly outline today's session. We'll begin with a keynote from Frederic Boehm from the OECD. followed by a panel discussion featuring leaders in local integrity strategies, open contracting, infrastructure transparency, and anti-corruption communications. Then we'll wrap up with some key information on how to join the Open Gov Challenge, which will allow us to think about practical steps forward. We have an outstanding lineup of experts joining us today, to whom we are very, very grateful. This is Frederic Boehm from the OECD, Cecilia Moreira from the Municipality of Lisbon, Karolis Granickas from the Open Contracting Partnership, Manuel Gonzalez from COST, and Corina Rebegea from the National Democratic Institute. Again, we want to thank you very much for taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with all of us. So before we hand it over to Frederic, let's take a moment to revisit the poll and view the results. Let's see. Good. So I guess you're all looking at these results. We have 70% of master debt is in anti-corruption. This is quite a good number. But most of you are not a master but confident. That is really, really good. Or have heard and want to know more. This is a great attitude. Thank you very much for those answers. And how involved you are? Well, almost half of you are very involved. This is great news. And yes, almost a third are somewhat involved and another third not involved at all. And well, it's good to know that almost 60% would be interested in an anti-corruption thematic circle. Thank you. Good. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, now, yes, I'm gonna stop sharing this. Great, and it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Frederic Boehm from the OECD. Frederic has over 20 years of experience working on anti-corruption, governance, and public sector reform, which makes him a leading voice in this subject. Today, he will talk about the importance of promoting public integrity at the local level, as well as the current trends and opportunities. So, Frederic, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak about this topic that is gaining more and more relevance also in the discussion at the OECD. We have been approached by, I cannot count how many member countries and non-member countries asking what can we do better at local level. So it is a really timely topic that you choose, and it's becoming more and more relevant. Which doesn't mean that it wasn't relevant before, but it becomes more and more visible, let's say. So very quickly on the OECD. So we have now 38 member countries. You can see that geographically we are starting to be spread quite a lot. The latest members to join were Costa Rica, Colombia, Lithuania before, and currently there's an outreach to countries becoming member in the accession process, which is huge. So there are countries in Latin America, and Europe, and in Asia who are currently being in the accession process. The OECD essentially is about policy dialogue on a wide variety of issues, amongst others, public governance. I'm working on anti-corruption integrity in the OECD Public Governance Directorate. So the OECD promotes the policy dialogue amongst countries and is setting standards. And the relevant standards for today for anti-corruption, in this case, is the recommendation on managing conflict of interest from 2003, the transparency and integrity in lobbying and influence, which started in 2010 and has been revised now this year, 2024. But really the main recommendation, we call it, is the one on public integrity from 2017, which is very broad and is really our framework. And you will see that you can easily translate the ideas of this recommendation to the local level, but also to organizational level. And we will talk about it. I will present it a bit later. The other main task we are doing is promoting this dialogue. We have the official working party on public integrity and anti-corruption, but we also have several regional networks in Latin America, in Asia Pacific, the MENA region. We have more specific networks for auditors, for example. We have several analytical reports which are based on data, qualitative, quantitative. You can have a look at our website, the Public Integrity Indicator, which are starting now. And we provide also direct support to countries, from which also many of these insights are coming from, which are then fed back into the dialogue and the standards. So this was just a very quick overview before jumping into the topic. So when we think of fighting corruption, I think that over the last 20, 30 years, there have been a change. And I like to use this little picture and this comparison with the Hydra from the Greek methodology. You know, where you cut one head and then there are other heads coming out. And that's a bit the problem with a more traditional anti-corruption approach, which really focuses on detecting and sanctioning cases. I don't say that it is not important to detect and sanction cases. It is very important, so don't take me wrong. But what we can do definitely better is in closing the vulnerabilities in the system that make corruption possible in the first place. And this is less sexy, perhaps, but it is absolutely key. And at the OECD, we like to move from a culture of cases towards a culture of integrity. And this is also a bit the spirit of the OECD recommendation on public integrity, which you see now. When you Google it, you will find it in different languages as well. In essence, there are three main pillars of integrity: the system, the culture, and accountability. And I want to walk you through quickly through each one of these pillars, because I think that it will give you ideas on also what to do on local level, and also on what not to forget. For instance, not focus only on this transparency or social accountability, but also on the topics that are perhaps less appealing, but very, very important in promoting really a culture of prevention. So the first pillar, system, starts, of course, with a commitment at the highest level. Most important is to look how does commitment really translate. Resources, human resources, financial resources, how commitment can be incentivized. And here, for instance, civil society, citizens also play a key role. But this is, of course, very important. When we talk at the national level, it would be the highest authorities in the country. If we go back to the local level, it could be the mayor, for instance, that really needs to be behind. And then there's one principle that is very important: responsibilities. Because you will see, and you know, there are very different aspects related to anti-corruption. So we have audit, we have human resource management, we have procurement, we have, you name it. And they are typically different at national level, different ministries, different entities that are responsible for these tasks, but also at local level, there may be different secretaries, different units within the municipality that have important tasks that are related to integrity and prevention of corruption, even though it is not their main task. But this needs to be coordinated and have a coherent approach together. A strategic approach always helps. I don't want to get too much into it, but having clear objectives, a theory of change, clear standards, of course, are important. So if you want to develop a local municipal action plan, for example, think really about the theory of change, not of having something perfect, but something feasible to really achieve impact. The second pillar is about culture. And this is to make emphasis that we need to go beyond laws and regulations, that it's much about practice, about day-to-day behavior and organizational culture. And here we separate basically between the public sector culture, which is leadership, merit-based, capacity building, a culture of openness where you can talk about problems and raise concerns, which is focused on the public officials. And the principle of whole of society, which emphasizes the co-responsibility of all other actors in upholding and promoting public integrity in a given context. So business, CSOs, citizens have a right to participate, but also have a duty to contribute. And finally, the pillar of accountability, which really starts with risk management, and I will talk about it a bit more in a second. Risk management, internal controls, internal audits, boring but very, very important. Then the part of enforcement, of course, where many times in anti-corruption we tend to focus on criminal enforcement and forget about the disciplinary enforcement part, which is very important in promoting organizational cultures of integrity. The role of independent oversight. And of course, and this you know probably very good, the importance of transparency, engagement of stakeholders, openness, transparency, citizen engagement, and so on. So all this together can help really in preventing corruption and promoting cultures of integrity. And now let's dive a bit deeper, as you say in the title. If you see at the recommendation, you will see that the principles are quite generic, and it's on purpose because actually they have to be applicable across many, many different country contexts. So the institutional design, how to achieve this objective, can vary quite significantly even, but they can also vary from the level of government. So at national level, principle merit-based may mean something a bit different than at local level and at a municipal level. So why focus on the local level? You said it before. Subnational governments provide many of the public services that directly impact in people's daily lives. This is where government becomes really visible and palpable. At the same time, a significant share of corruption risks and instances due to this direct interaction happen also at the local level. I'm sure in the discussion you can also go a bit more into detail. And nonetheless, many of the anti-corruption and integrity strategies still focus at the national level. They still have very much the national level perspective and do not really consider the specificities of the local level. And here, well, there's a closeness between government and population with the risk of clientelistic relationship, nepotism, and so on, but also the opportunity for director accountability, community-based monitoring, you name it. The size, of course, plays a role. Few resources and capabilities, it's an issue. My little village in France has 200 inhabitants, so it's basically the mayor and the secretary, not much more. So what can they do realistically? And they are at the same time dealing with very sensitive sector like urban planning, health, education, sometimes depending on the context. So what we are also now working on is trying to find a methodology, an approach for local integrity that takes into account that context matters, that there are local specificities, depending on the economic activity. For example, if you have mining, it is very different than if you have a port or tourism. So the economic activities of the municipality will also play back into the corruption risks. The level of autonomy depends a bit on the country. If they have control over resources, capacity to levy taxes, and so on. And of course, there's a huge difference between small, medium, and big municipalities. They're completely different contexts. So the challenge is to ensure coherence at national level across municipalities of these different realities, but allowing to be sufficiently flexible to reflect these different realities. And finally, and I know that I'm already a bit over time, but I just wanted to make two, let's say, emphasis on 2 points. One is don't forget about the human beings that are involved. Often in anti-corruption, we tend to focus a bit too much on the institutional factor, on regulation, institutions, and forget about a bit about the human beings. And most people want to act with integrity. The anti-corruption discourse focuses a lot on basically everybody is potentially corrupt, which unfortunately also sends signals that may be actually even backfiring in promoting cultures of integrity. So be aware also of that most people are not these bad criminals and corrupt public officials, and rather think of how to enable, how to strengthen, how to make them more visible, the ones that are doing their job good, make them visible. And finally, because there's much more to say on this, the boring topic of internal control. But if you think of a municipality and you are, for example, a mayor, of course, everybody in your administration has a responsibility in integrity. This is the first line. But typically, it's good to have a person, someone who is responsible to provide support, provide internal guidance, monitor the implementation of whatever action plan you may have, articulate the different units that are responsible for different areas of anti-corruption policies. Perhaps even someone who you can go to and talk about problems, about issues. I'm not talking about whistleblowing. I'm talking about the normal guidance, and be sure that you have a good internal audit function. And here, for example, especially for smaller municipalities, you can explore the potential for shared services, so that different municipalities, for instance, share an internal audit service. The UK is an interesting example for this, but something similar could be sought for the second line, for the support function. That given the sizes of smaller municipalities, it's not realistic that every municipality has such a function, but you could share it with other municipalities. And it is really important to ensure the implementation of integrity policies and achieving anti-corruption. Here you have the QR code to our site, and I'm sorry for being a bit too long, but I hope it was still interesting, and I'm looking forward to questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Frederic. Those were very insightful remarks, and thanks for emphasizing the importance of designing tailored solutions that are not perfect, but feasible, as you just said, and the importance of this co-responsibility with different actors to address anti-corruption at the local level, where, as you said, as we've been saying, governance directly impacts people's lives. So thank you very, very much. Now, as we all know, at least being successful in this needs a very good strategy, right, to guide it. So to tell us more about this, we have Cecilia Moreira from the Lisbon City Council, where she leads the Transparency and Corruption Prevention Department. With a long career in internal audit and risk management, Cecilia has been instrumental in strengthening Lisbon integrity frameworks. So today, she will share with us Lisbon Municipality Transparency and Corruption Strategy. And this was a key initiative shaped through a participatory process that, as Frederic just said, is so important. So Cecilia, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning. Allow me to start to say thank you, OGP. We are pleased to be here in this webinar, talking about our journey in what concerns these matters of transparency and corruption prevention. I would like to to say that my name is Cecilia Moreira, as you told so, and I'm the director of the Department of Transparency and Corruption Prevention. So I would like to start by talking about our organization, because let me tell you that, sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay. I would like to start to talk about our organization. My presentation would be focused on these 6 bullets. The path we have taken until now, our municipality strategy for corruption. Oops. Sorry, Mercedes, it was me.
No problem. Thank you.
I think someone don't want me to talk about our department. I don't know. May I begin, Mercedes?
Yes, please, go ahead. I think we're there. Right.
Okay.
Here we are.
Let's
No one
start.
touches anything.
Lisbon City Council, the 6 bullets. I don't know what's happening.
Okay, maybe we can give you the page so
Okay,
I can help you.
sorry. The path we have taken was municipality strategy and for transparency and corruption prevention, the Department of Transparency and Corruption Department results, and I think it's almost important to talk about main challenges. In what concerns Lisbon City Council, I must tell you that is the largest municipal authority in the country. This is not only because it's the capital council, but also because it has a structure that truly functions as a city government with 15 municipal departments, around 180 managers and 10,000 employees. I think this is a structure that is important to talk about. Lisbon City Council has been a pioneer in what concerns Portugal in these matters by developing a transparency and corruption prevention strategy. As so, by creating the department who I am director with these strategic goals. And I was listening to Frederic. That was another of our one goal that we have in this strategy. It was to implement the 3 lines, the old 3 lines of defense. It concerns that we making audit as an independent department who implements, don't controls. So I think it's important to say our work in this matter. After and speaking in what concerns our strategy, we made a comprehensive participatory process, and then we developed a transparency and corruption prevention strategy. That is so important because it defines our integrity policy, reflects our individual and collective commitment. I think it's important to have this all organization aligned in the exercise of our duties, preventing and combating corruption. What can I say more? That, as I've told you, that strategy was built with internal and external participation. That was very important to hear all sides, with 7 internal sessions, involved all a group of workers, 26 departments, involving external participation with 2 external sessions, 53 public figures, and some external entities. In conclusion, we had 2,000 more or less proposals. Then I think it's important to give you, the results. We built a strategy measured by 3 axes or 3 pillars: people, organization, and city, with 9 strategic goals and 51 operational measures. I think that is an innovation in what concerns public administration, because we work with all units, with all services, and with their knowledge, we made this strategy. Those are the 9 goals. In what concerns people, oops, promote, sorry. Promote a culture and ethics and integrity, increase transparent and collaborative public management practices, and implement meritocracy mechanisms. In what concerns organization, we implement a culture, that is our work, to implement a culture of continuous improvement through planning, control, and risk management, develop internal communication and knowledge management, facilitate access to information and use data, and in what concerns city, last not least, provide fast and transparent services, communicate and account in a clear and uniform way with the citizens, and boost ethics in a relationship between public and private organizations. Those are our 9 goals. This is the timeline, our strategy design. We started with the phase 0 and phase 1 with the internal and external involvement. Then we had a phase 2 with diagnosis, phase 3 listing the leaders, then a phase 4 with public consultation, then a phase 5 executive validation, a 6th phase with disclosure, and now we are here in what concerns monitoring. As we are creating the strategy, and as I told you, we created the Department of Transparency and Corruption Prevention and the Department of Internal Audit. In what concerns our department, I think it's important to say that we have a mission here. The department has almost one year. We started with the team by internal recruitment, most internal recruitment. We have some, let me see, sorry, okay. We have a mission that consolidates with the vision that our Lisbon City Council has. We have 2 divisions, Division of Administrative Transparency and Accountability and the Division of Prevention and Controls, with all those skills, as you can see, communication and engagement. I think it's important to have a focus in what concerns communication and engagement. I don't see working in these matters without all the organization aligned. We must see all the organization as one. In what concerns administrative transparency and accountability, of course, access to administrative and environment information. The other part of in what concerns policies and strategies, it's very important in this matter too. The regulatory compliance program and internal control systems. Those are our goals. What can I say about results? And we have a great path until now. We have policies and strategies. We are working in what concerns the organizational alignment. We talk about when we talk about prevention, when we talk about ethics and integrity, the most important, I think, we must think it's the culture of the organization. And so this alignment is so important for us. Then the compliance program, improving the transparency and corruption prevention mechanisms, which means the risk management plan, the whistleblower channel, training program promoting a culture of integrity. I can say that we have strong training program in what concerns ethics and integrity. Then we have some strong focus in administrative transparency and accountability, communication and engagement, and reinforcement of internal control system. What are, because I think this is important to speak, what are the main challenges in this path, considering the profile of our Lisbon City Council in terms of the dimension, process, complexity, non-homogeneous groups, and geographic dispersion. I can tell you the main challenge are the culture organizational, the financial, human, and technological resources. Don't forget that we are a public service, a public institution. In what concerns constraints, we have the compliance and conformity versus effectiveness. Sorry. We have a strong compliance, strong laws in what concerns public administration. And we have the four main challenge, that is expectations. Everyone wants to know what we are doing, what are our work. So the quick wins are to meet one of the main challenges. What can I tell you to finish? I think that we made a great work until now with all these mechanisms that we have worked since there. I put it here that it has been a marathon in which resilience, collaboration between all departments, and last but not least, a top-down approach have been critical to the success of the organization, and that is most relevant. We must have the tone at the top. It's important that the organization has this strong focus in what concerns transparency and the corruption prevention. And I think that's all.
Thank you.
My name, I leave you my contacts here. Thank you so much. If you want something or to have some questions, please do anytime. We will be here to share our experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Yes, please, if you have any questions for Cecilia, don't hesitate to write them on the chat. She'll be here available to answer any questions. Yes. So thank you very much for this presentation and for demonstrating how internal and external participation were key to shaping the city's transparency and corruption prevention strategy. And also the importance of training and aligning the whole organization, because culture organization is not only a challenge in this one, but also in many other organizations and entities. So thank you very much. Now, one of the most important activities local governments do is public contracting, right? However, it is always a high risk of corruption. There's always a high risk of corruption, which can have devastating effects. Schools may not get the books children need, and medical centers may not get the supplies for their patients. So we'll now hear from Karolis Granickas from the Open Contracting Partnership, where he's a head of Europe and works with the European institutions, country governments, and civil society to improve public spending in the region. Today, he will share with us how governments are transforming public procurement to make it more transparent and accountable, especially through open contracting. So, Karolis, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mercedes. I was very carefully listening to two presentations just now. Amazing, Cecilia, amazing job, and Frederic also. I enjoyed how systemic, you are, but at the same time, not forget people and culture. I thought that's really, really interesting. To be honest, I see some questions in the chat, and I feel like, can you take the third presentation in a row? I can try, and I can try to be maybe simple, straightforward, and short, to keep it easy on you guys. But I'll try to be mindful that it's the third in a row, and we have limits. So I'll start. So open contracting partnership, you might have heard about open contracting. So there is an organization, a global organization behind the idea that started promoting the idea, and it's called Open Contracting Partnership, a non-profit organization based out of Washington, D.C. with a global presence. I do lead our work in Europe, and what we do essentially is we promote the principles of open government in the field of procurement, right? So if you know, open government is about new technology, it's about openness, transparency, and accountability. We believe that these principles should be applied in procurement as well. Now, why procurement, you might ask? I don't think a lot of people still have to think about it too much, but just as a reminder, it's just a lot of money. It's about 15% of global GDP. Many more, a higher percentage in many countries, up to 25% of country GDPs across the globe. At the same time, a lot of money, and then number one, corruption risk, right? So you twin those two together, and well, you have an issue. You have a field that's interesting and that's important, right? Because it's very risky and it's a lot of money, very high discretion powers, and that's where dangers are. And that's why we look at procurement. Now, what are we sort of promoting in the area, right? Well, the first, we believe in the power of information and data. As I just said, $13 million annually. What we know is only about 3% of that money is accounted with public information, meaning that, well, we don't know much about public procurement. There's no information in the public, and that's a huge problem. And what we then say is that, well, basically you have a lot of power, you have a lot of money, but then you kind of blindfold it from a multi-sectoral perspective to, as a CSO, to track, to follow the money, as a government to actually manage your risks, as a supplier, as a company to be able to participate fairly, you know, in procurement. Well, and that's a bit of a challenge if you think about it. Now, what do we say then in that framing as an organization, as Open Contracting Partnership? We say, okay, well, first, publish open data and start with a good information in the public, engage stakeholders into monitoring to improve policies, right? That sounds very simple, and it might be applied in many different fields differently, but essentially that's what we say. We believe in the power of information, participation, and making things better, right, in procurement field. Now, what is better, you might ask, in procurement, right? Here we have something that we call use cases. So we can talk about market opportunities, about small, medium enterprises accessing your local contracts, value for money. We can talk about better prices, or better delivery, you know, in your local city, in simple, you know, simple services, public integrity, something that we're focusing on today, service delivery for citizens, or internal efficiency, just making things quicker, better. And we know already for a fact that better information helps achieve those things, and better participation helps achieve those things. Now, you don't have to know a lot about this, but I'll throw it at you the key technology item that we promote, which is the data standard. The problem we have is that the information about procurement is very complex. And what we say is that, well, you gotta clean it up. You have to have a structure. You have to have an agreement between departments, between institutions, between country on what we call what, right? And what we call it Open Contracting Data Standard, which is the way to kind of organize your information in the best possible way. A lot of countries implement it already. Very likely your country does it already, because we have about 40 countries implementing it. So you just have to know what's happening on a national level, and very likely already have it in your country. Now, essentially what that means, translated into a simple language, we make a picture much more granular with much better information. Now, what you do with that picture then is obviously depends on process, on culture, on systems and everything. But the key thing that we promote is better information and better data. The picture you see here right now is the picture of the planet Pluto few years ago and the planet Pluto a few years ago, you know, and that's essentially where we want to push procurement. Procurement is somewhere in between right now, if I'm honest. It's not really HD, but it's not as pixelated as you see on the left-hand side. So that's what we as our organization promote. Now, what are the impacts we might be thinking about? Well, first of all, obviously today we're speaking about corruption, but corruption is such a pervasive issue in different areas that I thought that I'd mentioned that, especially with the green transition agenda, where there are a lot of corruption risks. One of the impact areas that we're looking at, for example, in Mexico City was really an environmental impact. There was also economic and social inclusion. In Nigeria, we worked with promoting women businesses to become local suppliers. And that's really a local issue and an issue that many cities, many governments care about, just uplifting the marginalized groups in your local communities. And obviously, then the third one is fighting corruption, where in Bogota, in Colombia, we managed to help the government to really fight this old scheme of price fixing in the food sector. And open contracting was really used very well for that. Now, as I said, I'm going to be brief. There is a lot of information on the OGP website on how to do a good commitment, what are the cases. There's a lot of information on our website. I don't want to bombard you with a lot of stuff. The best thing to do as a follow-up is to reach out to either OGP or us, or me personally, and we'll point you in the right direction. But maybe I can share a couple of lessons that we've learned in implementation of open contracting. I thought that might be a bit more useful. The first thing I want to say is that the biggest success stories we've seen depended on the individual leaders taking the charge, right? Sometimes we have this feeling that on a local level, you know, it's only a small city. The national policy, national legislation does not allow me to do this or that. But what we've seen is that when individual leadership, you know, individual leaders step up and start doing things, they're able to really, you know, shake things up on a national level. The case I showed from Bogota, it was led by a secretary of education of the city. After that, you know, story, she got promoted to a national secretary of education and started shaking things up nationally. Now, we have a lot of these type of stories where if I try to distill and see, well, what works? The individual leadership really does work. So on a local level, especially, that matters so much. So that's the first lesson. Now, the second lesson is about the value of data. And I don't have to spend a lot of time here, but information is power. And in procurement in our space, that is really, really the case. And there are a lot of technology tools already available for your use to get that going on a local level as well. Now, but at the same time, we see sometimes that transparency is used as a shield as well. You throw out a lot of information and then you say, well, I'm good, I'm transparent. It means there is no corruption. Well, that's a fake kind of, you know, logical sequence. You really have to think about, well, what you are publishing, who's going to use it, how, and have a bit of a theory of change behind that. So think about who will use that information. And we see that especially in the OGP national action plans, that is one thing that's really not, well, also local. What's missing is that there are a lot of commitments of just publishing information, but there's not really a well thought through mechanism of why, for what purpose, you know, things like that. And that goes a long way. Now, the fourth lesson is that we see that a lot of times when commitment is made, it says, well, some institution will publish information, but there are no linkages to governmental users as well, right? There's so much value for governments themselves to use procurement information. And the lesson is that working with service delivery departments really go a long way, and we've seen that happening very successfully. The next one is about agile adoption, right? It's one of those areas where you don't plan it as a project from A to B and you wrap it up. it's really one of those experimental kind of incremental initiatives that you go step by step, see what works, reflect, see what works, reflect, adjust, and move step by step. Which obviously then takes continuous also engagement with stakeholders, necessarily also with external stakeholders, to understand how this information really make change for them, and how a lot of times publication of information, when it's locked in the interest in the market, is much stronger than only for governmental purposes. Well, it's not going to be surprised that political support obviously is also one of the big lessons that matters, and I've seen that already from both Cecilia and also Frederic, that leadership commitment is very, very important, and we can only confirm that. And obviously, when we think about incentive mechanism, I wouldn't treat transparency in public procurement as only a transparency exercise. I would really think how to make it useful for governments. We've seen the most successful initiatives that started inside, just making their job easier and then building on that. So that's one of the key lessons as well. No, I'm not gonna that's already a bit more information, I suspect. So I'm gonna just very briefly say that what we then as organization can help with, we can help you think through your OGP commitment. We can help you think through the reform, because we help design goal-oriented reforms. We help building coalitions of change, and then co-creating these data or technology solutions together with you. That's basically our organizational offer, right? And we can really help you get that commitment in place. That's something that really does make sense. So I'm just throwing it out there for you. But as I said, the best thing to do if you want to follow up is just to reach out back to the OGP or to me or to anyone at the OCP, and we can take it from where you are in this case. And Mercedes, I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Karolis. I'm sure that you're going to receive lots of questions and interest on this from our colleagues. So thank you very much. And thank you for highlighting the significance of open contracting and how open data, and not only opening data, but any information, but quality data that can be reused, thinking of who's going to use it, and engaging stakeholders in the monitoring is all crucial for improving policies and leading towards more inclusive, green, and just communities. So thank you also for showing us the impact that it goes beyond just fighting corruption, but also, as I mentioned, the being more inclusive and green. So thank you very, very much. Good. So another important role of local government is ensuring that local infrastructure is up to par, right? So as a type of public contracting, it is also there's also a risk of corruption in infrastructure, right? So I would like now to introduce Manuel Gonzalez. He's a lead of cost strategy in Latin America. And Manuel has a wealth of experience in public contracting and infrastructure transparency. And he'll share with us how cost works with multiple sectors to promote transparency, accountability, and better infrastructure management. Manuel, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mercedes and everyone. I was also hearing very good presentations from Karolis, Leticia, and Frederic. Like, I'm impressed and happy to share the cost experience, more specialized in the public infrastructure and what we are doing as a global organization. We are based in London. There is but we work by regions. So we have representations in Latin America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And we have teams to support any efforts we have also by region. We are, as an organization, what we are trying to do also, or working on, is on changing the culture, as Cecilia mentioned. I think that's very important. This is the key element of our impact in a sector that is sometimes complex. But we want to make it simple, and to make it simple for citizens and for all the stakeholders involved, also including public officials, private sector, journalists, to bring them data that is easier to understand, to make their work happening. One of the key elements that we are doing is working on public integrity or prevention of corruption in the sector. As we know, in all in our countries and local governments, we have scandals day by day of corruption. We have seen when we go to streets, like many public infrastructure that is not delivered properly on time. And we know that some of them are also related to inefficiency or corruption nationally and internationally. And that's the thing with the private sector, that some companies are building infrastructure in different countries, in different local governments. So one company probably is not only working with you in your local government, but also in other local governments, or even in other countries. And as a global organization, our base is to work with the private sector, the government, the civil society, and other stakeholders involved in the public infrastructure sector. So that's the roots of our organization. We work as a membership program. So as a local government, you will apply to the cost board. You will approve. There is a formal process to do this, and we will track your strategy, your implementation strategy, and support you on this implementation strategy. We have been also working together with OGP in OGP commitments together. So one OGP commitment could be to join COS and implement the tools and standards. We implement international standards and tools related to public infrastructure transparency and promote learning and also the international debate between governments and between civil society, private sector, and other stakeholders. All what we do is to have better services and improve life of citizens. We have 4 pillars that we are working in COS. The principle, as I mentioned before, is the multi-stakeholder approach, the multi-stakeholder working. So in each local program or government, we build a group where are represented the main stakeholders from government, as the transparency or anti-corruption institution, sometimes the procurement institution, the public works ministry, from industry, the chambers, normally construction chambers, or the engineers associations also, and from civil society, the main civil society organizations based in your local government. They work together to make a strategic plan where all the voices are heard, to build basically trust and effectively solve complex challenges. So this is something a bit formal, and they will create action plans yearly or for 5 years also. After that, we work on the disclosure of data based on the stakeholder needs. And we work together with organizations such as Open Contracting Partnership. As Karolis mentioned, we have in many countries the OCDS standard already implemented, so it's easier to implement the standard that we built together with OCP, that is the OC for IDS, Open Contracting for Infrastructure Data Standard, where we request 40 data points from the life cycle of an infrastructure project, since the beginning of the project until the end of a project. And we disclose data based on this standard globally. Then we work on something that we have been talking also, is that once we disclose information and we publish information, we need to care about the use of this data, how we are going to use it. And we have a whole strategy of social accountability where we build capacities on citizens, public officials, journalists, and the private sector on the use of this data. And they use it for their daily work. So we show them. Sometimes we know that the tools and the websites are there, but people don't know. So this is something that we reflect, and we are all the time working on how to make people use the data and bring the data in a format that is attractive for them. And then we do like a specific research study. It's the most technical part, is an assurance study on key infrastructure projects where we revise or assure the data that they are disclosing. Those are projects that are selected by the multi-stakeholder group, and we we identify concerns on these projects to improve and to bring recommendations and a recommendation report to the government to make changes based on data. Some examples I want to show you. We have been working with Bogota as the capital city of Colombia for more than 5 years. They have disclosed the main infrastructure projects such as the Metro of Bogota, the subway system that is, everybody who knows Colombia or Bogota knows that they need a subway system because it's the biggest city in the world without a subway system. So they have been working for many years on building the subway system, and they need to inform to the community in a way that makes them trust the government. So we have been working together with them, specifically for the Metro project in sharing with them our experience globally, but also in the building of this website where they can show all the relevant infrastructure for citizens. In Colombia, we have already like a culture of civil participation. So we also, as a program, we reinforce the efforts that the government had been doing for many years, no? Specific for public infrastructure. In the case of Secondo Itacoradi in Ghana, we have been also working closely with the government, the private sector, and the civil society. This is something that COS proposes to involve like actively the leadership of the private sector. And this is very relevant because they are the ones who are building the infrastructure, and they need to be here, and they need to have a leadership on fighting against corruption. And with this website also, we are showing the infrastructure projects in Secondo Itacoradi, that is a local government in Ghana, and they have been also implementing the Infrastructure Transparency Index, that is a tool where we measure the different aspects of the infrastructure environment in a local government or in a country, you know? And the other example, in another region in Asia Pacific, we have in Indonesia the government of West Lombok that have also developed the INTRAS platform based on the OC for Ideas standard, where they are disclosing data. And the good thing is, once we have all these portals based on infrastructure and with the same standards, is that we can communicate with each other and compare data, what's going on in West Lombok, what's going on in Bogota, and what's going on in Secondo Itacoradi, and other programs where we have more than 20 programs around the world that are disclosing data daily in the public infrastructure, and we managed to compare and to learn from each other. This is an example of an action. This is the mayor of Guadalajara in Mexico. They have also a disclosure portal, and that's how a leader is taking, that Karolis was mentioned, that the individual leadership is very important, and I'm completely agree. But it's important also that all the actors are relevant, and in his left hand is the president of the Construction Chamber of Jalisco, next to him, showing the results of the public infrastructure. It was also in a PPT, but he was showing it in a paper that he had in his hands, and saying that how's the implementation of the infrastructure projects, and they were comparing also which companies were granted with the infrastructure project, in which projects, and what's the implementation process of each one. And the person in the left is our leader in Jalisco, is the controller of Guadalajara right now, is Cintia Cantero. That is also being crucial for the involvement of the academia, that is also have a relevant role in our programs. Key lessons from what we have been learning in the last years in cost. This is changing, the technology is changing, so we need to be aware of technology. Now we're talking in all our multi-stakeholder groups how to involve artificial intelligence on fighting against corruption. But the collaborative efforts with the stakeholders, and to have the key stakeholders on the tables, is very important, considering the private sector role and leadership as a key ally fighting against corruption. We have seen that companies are very interested in working on this. We need to work on their ethical and anti-corruption policies also together. and they are willing to support government to fight against corruption. Building capacities and to guarantee the use of tools is important also. This is an effort, daily effort, and once we can institutionalize this in the government, in the capacity building process of government institutions, is the best way to do it in our experience. And it's very important to be aware of what's happening in other governments, in other countries, in other regions, to learn. We don't need to invent the wheel. Like there are many things happening around the world, and governments are also willing to share their experience, their good practices with other governments to combat corruption in a more effective way. Also, one thing that is very important and we have learned across the years is that we need to communicate in an effective way. And that's how journalists are a key stakeholder to always have involved in our processes. We have a learning process or a capacity building program for journalists that is very important because they have to know what we are disclosing, how they can access to the data to make their work or job more efficiently. And we are also seeing a trend globally, how influencers in social media or the new journalists in social media, that could be any citizens, are also getting involved in the fighting against corruption. So we need to also have them as a key partner to build capacities, to have a communication channel, because they are being an important partner fighting against corruption across the world. Yeah, thank you very much, and yeah, thank you so much for the time, and I'm here to answering questions.
Thank you very much, Manuel. This was very, very exciting. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting the importance of transparency in infrastructure projects, and also for giving us the tangible steps to improve accountability and improve the quality of services. It's very interesting this that you mentioned of sharing experiences and promoting this debate internationally. Recently, two of our members, Secondly actually, and Kaduna, shared their experience in a blog, in an OGP blog. My colleague Clara shared it on the chat. So there you can all find also a little bit more about their experience, which is great. So thank you very much, Manuel, for your words. This was very, very enlightening. Great. So finally, we have Corina Rebegea from the National Democratic Institute, where she's a senior advisor on anti-corruption. Corina has over 15 years of experience in governance, rule of law, and anti-corruption communications, and she will discuss effective anti-corruption communications and how to mobilize citizens, not just through raising awareness, but by fostering active participation. So Corina, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the great conversation, both sort of on screen and in the chat. I feel very privileged to be able to listen to all the speakers. And maybe just briefly for those of you who are not familiar with NDI, NDI is a multinational organization. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. in the US, but we work in partnership with both civil society and with governments at both national and local level to support good governance, democracy, citizen participation. We have offices in over 50 countries. I've seen many of the countries in which we work represented here today, and programs in over 70. Anti-corruption is a big priority for us. We talk about anti-corruption as the integrity enabling environment that is working on transparency and participation and accountability and oversight. But I'm not going to talk about this today. I'm going to talk about anti-corruption communications, which is a somewhat an emerging topic, but really very important. And I think many of you have already seen that anti-corruption communications, anti-corruption campaign messages tend to be everywhere. They accompany reforms, and it could range from, as Cecilia was talking about, initiating a new local strategy on anti-corruption or national anti-corruption strategy, to perhaps a new policy opening up procurement, and so on. There's always a messaging component to that. And in some cases, and these are not the good case examples, campaigns actually replace actual reforms, but this is not something that we want to talk about. And I think one of the thing that is really important when talking about campaigns, and there was a thread in the chat about this, is that in many of the campaigns that we see, communication is unidirectional. You see these big billboards that have a very general message, and it's typically a negative message that says, corruption kills, stop corruption, don't pay a bribe, show the real face of corruption. We've all seen these, but they don't really address specific needs, interests, concerns, and demographics and society. And there is no way for citizens to actually contribute to these campaigns. And so the research so far, when we look at these campaigns, show that this type of campaigns that are sort of blanket, undirected, untailored, untargeted, actually reinforce negative perceptions that people have. And so especially for government officials, but also for civil society organizations that work on raising the awareness around corruption and anti-corruption efforts, it is really important that these negative perceptions are actually changed, not reinforced. So research shows that as a result of some of these campaigns, people tend to be more fatigued, disinterested when it comes to corruption. And their perceptions about the pervasiveness, about how widespread corruption is, are actually reinforced. And it may even send the message that corruption is socially acceptable. If it's everywhere, everybody does it. And so why not engage in corruption? And this is very problematic for campaigns. If the social behavior, as Frederic was talking about, the importance of human behavior and human attitudes is actually not changed. Now, why do we actually use campaigns, and how does this match with what we're seeing to be the effects of these campaigns in practice? So one of the most frequent sort of goal or objective of campaigns is to raise awareness. There was a conversation on this in the chat. You raise awareness about the campaigns, about the anti-corruption reforms or strategies in order to influence public opinion so that citizens then go and demand action from their government officials at local and national level. Or you're trying to trigger certain behaviors, for instance, reporting corruption. And I've noticed that some local governments within OGP have made commitments around this issue, creating, for instance, anonymous reporting lines or portals for citizens to go and report the perceived malfeasance or alleged corruption. But it's also a tool to build trust and actually engage citizens, make citizens a true stakeholder in anti-corruption, as we've heard from Cecilia, for instance, in engaging citizens and sharing, and other stakeholders in sharing their perspectives on what needs to be part of an anti-corruption strategy. Of course, no need to reinforce the role that local governments have to play and the advantages they have given the proximity. And with that, what actually might work if what we've tried so far doesn't really work? really quickly, I think having clear policy goals is really important. Why exactly are we deploying a campaign or messaging? Why are we putting up posters or maybe engaging journalists to communicate to the public? And what is the change we would like to see? Do we want citizens to report? Do we want citizens to come and maybe express their concerns and experiences? I think a good campaign starts there. The other thing is understanding who we are talking to. I think at national level, we've seen some efforts through surveys and focus groups, to understand how people experience corruption and what expectations they have. I think this is happening perhaps less at subnational level, but it's really a key component, because in our work, and we've done sociological research in 4 countries around the world so far, and will continue to do so, but we are seeing very different perspectives from different demographic groups, different age groups, and so on. Women experience and perceive corruption differently, youth do, people in more rural areas versus urban areas. So understanding these concerns will help, in particular, in this case, government officials better communicate, better engage, and tailor those messages to the specific audiences so that they can get the engagement they hope to get. And then something that is really important, and I think those speakers before me have touched upon this, messaging needs to be embedded in a broader campaign of action. It needs to pair up with an anti-corruption reform. It can be an implementation of a more transparent public procurement or public contracting system. It can be the new anti-corruption strategy. It can be a new reporting line. I think the messaging campaign will have more success if people see that there's actually some political commitment. And I think Karolis was talking about the leadership commitment and how important that is in showing that there's a reform, so there's something to talk about, but also focus on issues that citizens care about. In the campaigns that have been implemented around the world, the ones that have been more successful were the ones that actually got to the issues that people cared about locally. It could be service delivery, it could be public services that they get by interfacing with public administration, and so on. So the way we get to understanding what citizens want and what they care about is by doing that detailed audience research or reach out, talking directly to citizens. And then one important way to keep citizens engaged in these campaigns is to actually show how their input has been incorporated in the actual reforms or actions that the governments are taking. And I put here on the slide a case study that we've done in Moldova. We're doing a lot of research on this topic in Moldova, and something that came through in our focus groups and surveys is that mayors are the most trusted public institution. This has been consistent throughout the years. I've tried to look for similar statistics from regional and global barometers. I don't think people are actually measuring where mayors are when it comes to anti-corruption and compared to other national actors. But in Moldova's case, mayors are the most trusted public institution. And so this gives mayors a tremendous power and privilege to actually take action and also communicate to citizens on anti-corruption. And one way to do that, our team in Moldova has done this in a separate program, is to build the so-called feedback loops between local decision makers and citizens. This is a great way to understand what issues people care about, but then also communicate to them what actions have been taken. And this can involve issues related to perceived corruption, but it can also be more on opportunity of certain public investments, for instance. And something we noticed after previous local elections, that we worked in 100 municipalities. The re-election rate for mayors that have been involved, not because they were involved in the program, but they were genuinely interested in building these feedback loops and talking to citizens and engaging citizens in their local strategies, was over 80%. So this really reinforces this connection that local officials have with their citizenry, and how they can play a really important role in not only communicating about corruption, but actually taking action against corruption. Sorry, I moved too fast. And finally, how do we go about building more effective campaigns and avoiding the pitfalls that would, make citizens actually disengage? One thing, and we've noted there, we've done some work on this, which you can consult online, is to have very tailored and targeted campaigns that are repeatedly tested to understand what kind of messaging actually works. Another important lesson that we've seen from global research and from practice is that we need to avoid negative messages. In the examples that I was talking about before, we see these posters that say corruption kills, corruption destroys education, and so on. These are all negative messages that promote cynicism and disengagement. In campaigns, we want to promote hope, show that other people hold the same beliefs. I think Frederic was talking about this too. Most people want to do the right thing, and this is what surveys show. I think communicating, making people understand and see that others are their allies and want to do the right thing is important. But also showing that people are, or some people are already doing the right thing. You can have naming and faming campaigns. This has been tested, I think, in an accountability lab program in various countries where local and national public officials were highlighted as accountability icons, right? People who are doing the right thing, who are taking action against corruption. And then finally, using credible messengers and messages. Credibility is really important. Again, in the example from Moldova, mayors tend to benefit from people's trust the most. So they are very likely very credible messengers to talk about anti-corruption. And also, positive messages need to be based on reality. They can't just be positive without being connected to some type of reform that governments are implemented. And not least, showing how progress has been achieved. For instance, and I think, Cecilia, you also touched on this in your presentation. There's a lot of data that local governments collect, through audit reports, other accountability mechanisms, working with organizations like OCP and COST, and communicating the changes that have been made as a result of that can also be a really good way of keeping citizens engaged and communicating about corruption. I'm out of time. There is a lot more to say about anti-corruption communications, but in terms of thinking about commitments that local governments can make, reinforcing this idea that citizens are part of local anti-corruption strategies, and taking their participation and their inputs into account in broader communication campaigns, I think is a really important message to take away and understand how this can be built into other anti-corruption commitments that governments make. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Corina. And it's very interesting to see how communication can be really a tool for change and to engage citizens, but always, and only when you listen to the different groups and understand their concerns. And also, as you very well said, when you give the feedback on how the input was used for shaping policies. So thank you very much. Good. And for our final segment, and we might take 5 extra minutes for closure. So if you can stay, please stay. And this is a very important segment. We'll be diving into the Open Gov Challenge. To explain this exciting initiative, I'm pleased to hand it over to Paula Perez, our colleague, who will walk us through the next steps and how we can all get involved in the Open Gov Challenge. So Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. Let me just start here. So hi, everyone. I'm Paula Perez. I'm part of the Policy and Partnerships team in the OGP support unit. So what is the Open Government Challenge? The Open Government Challenge is a tool that OGP has developed as a result of a big consultation process that we did to inform OGP's strategy for the next 5 years. And I'm sure many of you participated in that consultation, so thank you for all your inputs. One of the things that we've heard is OGP members have really made good progress on key areas, but we still need to raise ambition if we really want to make open government the norm and make open government policies more impactful. So the aim of the challenge is really to raise that overall ambition and the impact of open government reforms. So for that, we have identified 10 areas that are crucial to strengthen democracy and to advance open government. This is based on consensus that there are specific areas that should be prioritized if we want to raise the bar and effectively support democratic renewal. So you can see some of those areas listed here in this slide. We go from climate and environment to fiscal openness to access to information and anti-corruption. And within each of these areas, we have identified sort of concrete actions that members can take to make progress. And this action should be the most ambitious. We're really looking for actions that have the potential to be game changers across these different areas. So let me dive into the anti-corruption challenge, which is the most relevant for today's session. The anti-corruption challenge entails developing, strengthening, and/or implementing a whole of government anti-corruption legislation, strategy, or roadmap, which focuses on at least one of the areas that are listed in this slide. So open contracting, as we heard from previous presentations, is a key corruption risk area at the local level. So we are encouraging members to include open contracting within these action plans or action frameworks. Political finance and asset and interest disclosure, lobbying, integrity systems at the local level, extractive industries, transparency, beneficial ownership. And we're really looking here for comprehensive anti-corruption actions that tackle these specific issues that can help improve policy implementation interoperability. We're not looking for isolated short-term reforms. We're looking for actions that really promote systemic and sustainable changes. That is the aim of the challenge. So for example, at the local level, mapping specific corruption risks and creating strategies or legislation that can address that type of risk. And considering, of course, the specificities of the local context. Or, for instance, reforms that can close loopholes in existing accountability frameworks. So, for example, tightening rules on political financing, on lobbying, on conflicts of interest, by creating effective complaint mechanisms and enforcement mechanisms. Those are the types of initiatives and innovations that we are really looking for as part of the challenge. So I'm sure you're asking yourself, how can I participate in the challenge? So there are basically 3 ways in which you can do that. One of them is by nominating an OGP action plan commitment. So as I said, we're looking for the most ambitious reforms within an OGP action plan. But you can also submit a standalone action. This option recognizes that there are relevant reforms that take place outside of the timeline of an action plan process. And this is something that we heard pretty prominently during the consultations. And there are also institutions that are not necessarily involved in OGP, but are taking forward very strong policies. So this option is really an opportunity for everyone to engage in OGP. And the third option is to submit an entry for the Open Gov Awards. This option will be launched very soon, in a few weeks, so we will be sharing more information shortly. And as the slide says, and I know we're running out of time, these options are not mutually exclusive. So you can take part in all these different ways. To close, I will share in the chat one of the resources that we have developed to support the Open Gov Challenge. This is the Open Gov Guide, and it includes recommendations, examples, international standards to really implement and put a challenge submission forward. So we look forward to your submissions, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mercedes. Back to you.
Thank you very, very much, Paula, for explaining what ambitious anti-corruption commitments look like to meet the Open Gov Challenge. We really hope that you all can join. So as we close, I encourage you all to reflect on the different approaches we've discussed today: integrity strategies, open contracting, infrastructure transparency, and effective communications, and how they apply to your own context. So together, these approaches are key to help fight corruption in local governments. So with that in mind, let's summarize a few key takeaways that highlight the importance of these approaches. So local governments have their own corruption risks that need to be identified and addressed, and mapping risks and developing a strategy, just as Lisbon did and shared with us, to make specific processes and procedures more open and accountable, can help minimize those risks. That's why it's so important. And increasing transparency and promoting greater public oversight in public procurement and infrastructure can help curb corruption at the local level. Engaging citizens, and this is very interesting because you all mentioned the importance of engaging citizens throughout the different processes, and citizens and civil society in anti-corruption efforts is vital to overcoming institutional resistance and complementing oversight institutions. This is why anti-corruption campaigns must be designed and engage citizens and foster active participation. Finally, the Open Gov Challenge is calling our members, all of our members, to develop comprehensive anti-corruption legislation, strategies, and roadmaps, and institutionalized mechanisms to curb corruption in key public activities, such as public procurement. So, good. This is where our session finishes today. And I don't want to leave you without inviting you all to our next session. This is on October 2nd, next week, next Wednesday, same time. And we will discuss how fiscal openness initiatives can empower communities to shape their development priorities and ensure fair resource allocation. And if you want to know more about OGP Local, don't hesitate to visit the OGP Local website, join our community in Slack, and our local thematic circles, as we mentioned already, and make sure to check out our local roundup to stay updated on the news of not only the OGP members, but all local and many other local governments working on open government. Thank you very, very much for your participation, and you can go. Thank you. Have a great Corina, and thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you.
Please, if you have more questions, you can always reach out to us, and we'll make sure to share it with the speakers as well. Thank you, Paula, as well. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.